Mr. Raymond moved quietly through the halls of the music academy. His footsteps were soft, his hands steady, and his eyes tired but kind. Every night, when the students and teachers left, he came in with his mop and bucket. No one paid him much attention. To them, he was just the old cleaner who came after dark. He didn't speak much, and no one ever really asked him anything personal. He wore the same gray sweater every day, a little too big for his thin frame. His shoes were old and worn out, and he always carried a small leather bag. Some said he was strange. Others said he was just poor and had no other job. But no one really knew the man behind the broom. During the day, the academy was full of life. Music echoed from every room. Young students practiced their instruments. Some were serious. Others just wanted to show off. In the evening, laughter filled the halls as students packed up and left. And just when the lights dimmed and the last piano stopped playing, Mr. Raymond entered. He walked through each room with care, picking up wrappers, wiping benches, and dusting instruments. But he always took a little extra time in one room, the large piano room at the end of the hall. That room had a grand piano in the center, shining even in the low light. He would dust it gently like it was something sacred. Sometimes, when no one was around, he would sit on the bench, place his fingers on the keys, and press one note, just one, before he got up again and continued cleaning. The students had seen him do it once, and they laughed. They said things like, "Look at the cleaner pretending to be a pianist," or, "Careful, old man, don't break it." Mr. Raymond never responded. He just smiled softly and walked away. They thought he didn't care, but he did. He felt the sting of their words, but he had learned long ago to stay quiet. One evening, a group of students stayed late. They were preparing for a big competition, and the pressure was getting to them. They kept messing up the piece, their fingers stumbling over the keys. Frustrated, one of them, Elise, the best pianist in the group, threw her hands in the air and laughed. She said, "Maybe we should let the cleaner try. Maybe he can do better." Everyone laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was easy to laugh at someone like him. Raymond stood in the corner holding his mop. He looked at the piano, then at Elise, then said something no one expected. "I used to play," he said quietly. The room went silent. The students exchanged surprised looks. "You? Really?" one boy said, trying not to laugh. Raymond nodded. "A long time ago." Elise, still annoyed from her mistakes, raised an eyebrow and said, "All right then, show us." Another boy chimed in, "Yeah, let's see what you got, maestro." The old man hesitated, his hands slowly letting go of the mop handle. He walked to the piano like he was approaching an old friend he hadn't seen in years. He sat down on the bench, placed his bag on the floor beside him. The room was quiet now. No laughter, no talking, just silence. Raymond placed his fingers gently on the keys. They were stiff but steady, as if they still remembered something the others had forgotten. He looked down, took a deep breath, and pressed the first key. A single note echoed in the room, soft and warm. The students leaned in, unsure what was happening. Was he serious? Was this going to be a joke? But then he began to play, not fast, not flashy, just slow and full of emotion. Every note told a story, every pause carried weight. It wasn't just music, it was a memory being shared through sound. The students stopped smiling, their eyes fixed on the old man's hands. They watched, not as a cleaner played the piano, but as a musician returned to the instrument he had once loved. In those moments, the room felt different, full, alive, emotional. One of the students, the same boy who had laughed earlier, whispered, "This is beautiful." Another one pulled out her phone, recording without thinking. Elise stood silently, her heart beating faster. She had played that same piece many times, but never like this. This was something deeper, something raw. She felt a strange feeling rising in her chest, something close to guilt. The music ended after a few minutes. Raymond lifted his hands from the keys slowly, as if letting go of something heavy. He didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't ask for applause. He just picked up his bag, nodded to the stunned students, and walked away. The door closed behind him with a soft click. The students sat frozen, unsure what to say. And for the first time they looked at the cleaner not with laughter but with wonder. The next evening the music academy was buzzing with whispers. Students were talking in small groups, showing a video on their phones. Some had seen it live, others had only heard about it from friends, but everyone wanted to know the same thing. Who was the old cleaner? And how could he play like that? The short video was only 2 minutes long, but it spread quickly. It showed Mr. Raymond playing the piano with closed eyes, his fingers dancing across the keys. No one had ever heard something so pure, so emotional, so unexpected. There were no flashy moves, no wild hand gestures, just music that made people stop and listen. In the middle of the day, a group of students sat in the large piano room, the same one from the night before. They had skipped lunch just to talk about what they had seen. "I still can't believe it," one boy said, watching the video again. He looked like he hadn't played in years, but he played better than all of us. Elise was sitting quietly in the corner, her arms crossed. She hadn't spoken much since last night. She kept replaying the performance in her mind, the way his hands moved, the way the music made her feel. It wasn't just beautiful. It felt like a secret had been shared, a deep pain hidden in every note. She had dared him as a joke, but now she felt something else, regret. That night she stayed behind again, alone in the piano room. She didn't even practice. She just sat near the piano and thought. The same cleaner, the same piano, but a completely different feeling now. Around 9 p.m. she heard the familiar sound of the janitor cart rolling down the hallway. She quickly stood up and waited near the door. Mr. Raymond walked in, just like always, pushing his cart and holding his mop. He didn't seem surprised to see her, but he did raise an eyebrow, slightly. "I wanted to say thank you," Elise said, her voice soft. He paused for a second, then nodded slowly. "You're welcome," he replied and began cleaning. She followed him around the room, unsure what to say next. "Can I ask you something?" she finally said. Raymond didn't stop, but answered, "You can." "Why didn't you tell anyone you could play like that?" she asked. He wiped the windows quietly before answering. "Some things are not meant to be told. They are meant to be remembered." Elise didn't fully understand, but she could feel the weight in his words. "Did you used to be a pianist?" she asked again, more carefully this time. Raymond looked at the piano, not at her, and said, "A long time ago I was." The door creaked open and 2 more students walked in. They had also stayed late, hoping to see him again. When they saw Raymond, their faces lit up with excitement. "Sir, can you please play again?" one of them asked, almost begging. Raymond smiled politely but shook his head. "No, not tonight," he said gently. "One song was enough for now." The students looked disappointed, but they didn't argue. This time they respected his answer. Elise suddenly had an idea. She whispered something to the others and they all nodded in agreement. They pulled out a chair and placed it in front of the piano. Then they sat down on the floor, forming a small circle around the bench. Elise looked at Raymond and said, "You don't have to play, just sit with us." Raymond hesitated, confused but touched by the gesture. Slowly, he placed his mop aside and sat down on the chair. For a few minutes they all sat together in silence. It wasn't awkward, it was peaceful, like everyone was listening to a song in their hearts. Then one student asked, "What's your favorite piece?" Raymond thought for a moment and then said, "Debussy, Clair de Lune." The students smiled and one of them softly played the opening notes on her phone. The soft melody filled the room, and everyone closed their eyes. Raymond didn't speak, but his fingers tapped lightly on his knee as if playing along in his mind. Elise looked at him and saw a tear forming in the corner of his eye. She didn't say anything, just sat quietly and let the music play. After the song ended, Raymond stood up and nodded to the students. "Thank you," he said, his voice more emotional than before. "You reminded me of something I thought I had lost." They watched him leave the room, his step slow but steady. This time there was no laughter, no mocking, only silence and respect. Outside the night was cold and quiet. But inside the academy something had changed. The cleaner was no longer invisible. and the students had just learned that music is not about fame or skill. It's about the story behind the sound. The next few days at the music academy felt different. People walked a little slower through the hall, students whispered more softly. The video of Mr. Raymond playing the piano had reached thousands of views online. Even teachers had started asking questions, curious about the quiet man they had seen for years but never really noticed. But Raymond stayed the same. He still came in every evening, carrying his mop and pushing the cart. He didn't talk about what happened, and he didn't act proud. To him, it was just one moment, one memory, nothing more. But for the students who saw him, even those who had once laughed now lowered their heads when he passed. Elise watched him every evening from her practice room. She felt something she had never felt before, respect mixed with guilt. She had made fun of him, dared him to play, as a joke. But now she couldn't stop thinking about the way his hands moved, the way the music filled the air with emotion. One night, Elise stayed late again. She sat at the grand piano, trying to play the same piece Mr. Raymond had played. But no matter how hard she tried, it didn't sound the same. The notes were right, the rhythm was correct, but something was missing. It didn't feel alive. She placed her hands in her lap and sighed. Just then the door creaked open and Raymond entered with his usual calm steps. He looked at her and gave a small nod, then walked to the corner to begin cleaning. Elise stood up and walked over to him slowly. "Mr. Raymond," she said gently, "can I ask you something?" He paused and looked at her, his eyes kind but guarded. "Why did it sound so different when you played?" she asked. "I played the same notes, but it's not the same." He gave a soft smile and said, "Because you're playing music, but I was playing memory." Elise tilted her head, confused. "What do you mean?" Raymond looked at the piano, his eyes distant. "That piece, I played it for someone once, a long time ago," he said. "When I played it again that night, I wasn't just playing music, I was remembering." Elise wanted to ask more, but she stayed quiet. There was a silence between them. Not awkward, but deep. Then something happened. Raymond slowly walked to the piano again. He sat down, placed his fingers on the keys and began to play. Not the same piece, but something else. A slower, softer tune, full of sadness and beauty. This time, Elise didn't watch his fingers. She closed her eyes and just listened. The room melted away, and all she could feel was the music. It told a story without words. A story of loss, love, and something broken long ago. She felt a lump in her throat, her eyes growing wet. When the song ended, Raymond didn't look up. He just whispered, "That was her favorite." Elise opened her eyes and asked, "Her?" He nodded, "My wife." There was a long pause, filled with emotion neither of them could explain. "I lost her and my son in a car accident," Raymond said softly. "After that day, I stopped playing." Elise covered her mouth with her hand, shocked and speechless. "I tried to play. Once after the funeral," he continued, "but my hands wouldn't move, my heart just broke." He looked down at his hands, now aged and thin. "So I walked away from the stage, from the music, from everything." Elise didn't know what to say, so she just sat beside him in silence. She realized then that this man wasn't just a cleaner, or even just a pianist. He was a man who had lived through pain she couldn't imagine, a man who had poured all that emotion into a song that made people cry. She finally whispered, "I'm sorry for everything we said to you." Raymond turned to her, his eyes gentle. "I don't hold it against you," he said. "Sometimes people forget that pain hides in quiet places." That night, Elise walked home with a heavy heart. She couldn't sleep, the music still echoing in her mind. At school the next day, she shared the story with her closest friends, not for gossip, but to make them understand what the music had come from. Slowly, more students began treating Raymond with kindness. They greeted him, offered help, and even cleaned up their practice rooms before he arrived. Raymond noticed the change but never spoke of it. He simply smiled a little more often. And though he never said it out loud, he felt something returning. Not fame, not glory, but peace. The students began seeing him, not just as the man with a mop, but as the man who once played the world's saddest songs with the softest hands. The academy slowly returned to normal. Students still practiced every day. Halls were filled with music again. But something had changed forever in the hearts of the students who had seen Mr. Raymond play. They no longer laughed when he entered the room. They greeted him politely, offered him chairs, and sometimes even stayed after practice to help him clean. He never asked for this kindness, but he accepted it with a humble smile. Though Raymond had opened a small door into his past, he still stayed quiet most of the time. He came, he cleaned, he left, like always, but more and more students wanted to know the story behind the music. One evening, as Mr. Raymond was cleaning the piano room, he noticed something different. The room was filled with candles and soft lights. A group of students had gathered on the floor waiting for him. Elise stood in the center, holding a small notebook. She stepped forward and said, "We want to know your story, sir." Raymond looked around at the quiet faces, young and full of hope. He wanted to walk away, but something stopped him. Maybe it was their eyes. Maybe it was the warmth in the room. He nodded slowly and sat down on the piano bench. Elise asked softly, "Were you really famous once?" Raymond smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Yes, many years ago," he said. "I used to travel the world, perform on grand stages. People would clap for minutes, throw flowers, take photos, but all of that feels like another lifetime now." "Then why did you leave it?" one student asked. Raymond looked down at the keys as if they held the answer. "My wife and son were everything to me," he said slowly. "One night we were driving home after a concert. It was raining hard. The road was slippery. A truck ran the red light. He stopped talking for a moment, his hands trembling slightly. "I survived, but they didn't," he whispered. "After that, I couldn't touch the piano without seeing their faces. I quit everything, sold my house, left the city, and started again. This time as someone no one would recognize." The students were silent, some wiping tears from their eyes. Raymond continued, "Music didn't leave me, but I left music. Until that night, when Elise asked me to play, I hadn't touched a piano in 20 years. I thought I had nothing left to give, but when I played, it felt like they were with me again." His voice cracked, but he didn't cry. The students sat around him in silence, moved by every word. For the first time, they understood the pain behind the beauty, the story behind the sound. Elise gently asked, "Do you think you'll ever play again?" Raymond looked at her and said, "Maybe, but only when the moment is right. Not for applause, not for praise, but for healing." That night, no one asked for a performance. They simply sat in the candlelight, listening to an old man's story. It was better than any concert, more real than any lesson. When Raymond stood up to leave, every student stood with him. He didn't say goodbye, just gave them a quiet nod and walked out. But his story stayed with them long after the candles burned out. The next day, the video of his playing continued to spread online. People from all over the world were sharing it, commenting on it. Some said it was the most emotional piano piece they had ever heard. Others asked who the mysterious man was and why he had disappeared from the world of music. Still, Raymond ignored the noise. He didn't care about views or fame, but something else began to grow. Letters, emails, and notes arrived at the academy. People wrote about their own losses, their own pain, and how Raymond's music had helped them cry for the first time in years. Some said they hadn't felt anything in a long time until they heard his music. Even people who never played instruments said they were touched. The academy principal was shocked. He called Raymond into his office and showed him the messages. Raymond read them quietly, one by one. "You've moved people across the world," the principal said. "Would you like to give an official performance here at the school?" Raymond looked at the pile of letters, then looked out the window. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that. But maybe one day, when the time is right." He stood up, thanked the principal, and returned to his cart and mop. But that night, as he walked into the piano room, he sat down again. Just for a moment. He placed his hands on the keys and played one soft, quiet tune. Only the empty chairs heard it. But it was enough. and for the first time in years he didn't feel broken after playing, he felt whole. The video of Mr. Raymond playing the piano was no longer just a moment at the music academy. It had now become something much bigger. Strangers from all over the world had seen it. Some people watched it and cried without knowing why. Some said it reminded them of their mother's lullabies. Others said it made them feel emotions they had buried for years. Still, no one knew who the man in the video really was. They just called him the mystery pianist, or the cleaner, who played like a master. The comments kept pouring in. People wrote things like, "His music healed something inside me," or "This man's hands tell stories without words." Others began to ask questions. Who was he? Where did he come from? Why was he working as a cleaner in a school? Everyone wanted to know more, but Raymond didn't respond to any of it. He didn't own a phone, didn't use the internet, didn't even know how famous he was becoming. All he knew was that he had played one song, and somehow it had reached thousands of hearts. At the academy, things were changing too. Students no longer saw the piano as just an instrument. Now they sat with it longer, listened more, and played not just to impress, but to feel. Many of them said they understood music better now, not from the lessons, but from watching Raymond play. Even teachers began sharing his story with new students. They didn't tell it like gossip, but like a legend that carried a lesson. The lesson was simple. Don't judge a person by the clothes they wear or the job they do. One morning, the head of the academy called a staff meeting. The video had reached a national news channel. They wanted to come film a story about Raymond. The students were excited, even nervous. They thought it was finally time for the world to know who he really was, but when the principal told Raymond, the old man shook his head gently. "I don't want cameras," he said. "I don't want reporters asking me about pain I still carry. They will turn it into a show." The principal nodded with respect. "Then we won't allow it," he said. "This is your story, and we will protect it." That same evening, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived from a hospital in another country. It was from a nurse who said she had played the video in the children's cancer ward. One of the children, who hadn't smiled in days, had smiled during the song. Another had asked to listen to it again and again, saying it made her feel warm. The nurse wrote, "I don't know who this man is, but please tell him that he brought light to a place full of pain." Elise read the letter out loud in front of the music students. Everyone was quiet. Some had tears in their eyes. No one clapped, no one cheered. They just sat with the moment, feeling the weight of it. After hearing that, Elise went to find Raymond. She walked with him through the empty hallway and shared the story of the little girl. He didn't say much, just looked at the floor and nodded slowly. But Elise saw something in his eyes, not pride, not joy, but peace. A kind of peace that only comes when you know your pain helped someone else heal. Later that week, the academy held a student-only event in the recital hall. There were no photographers, no guests, no social media. It was just the students, teachers, and one guest of honor, Mr. Raymond. They called it a night of memory and music. Each student performed a song inspired by emotion, not perfection. One student played a piece for his late grandfather. Another sang a song that helped her through depression. Each time someone played, they looked at Raymond in the front row, as if thanking him without words. At the end of the night, the lights dimmed, and the room fell silent. The principal walked to the stage and said, "We have one more performance if he's willing." All eyes turned to Raymond. For a moment he didn't move. Then he stood, walked slowly to the piano and sat down. He didn't look at anyone. He didn't speak. He just closed his eyes and let his fingers find the keys. The music he played was not loud, not grand. It was soft like a whisper, like a story being told to a close friend. The room was still and no one made a sound. Some students wept silently. Others closed their eyes to listen deeper. When the final note faded, Raymond opened his eyes slowly and looked up. He saw their faces, not full of praise but full of love. He stood, bowed once, and walked off the stage. No one followed him. No one needed to. They all knew they had just witnessed something that would stay in their hearts forever. And Raymond, for the first time in many years, felt something inside him heal just a little more. The night after, the private performance, the academy felt quiet and full of emotions. Everyone was still thinking about the music Mr. Raymond had played. Some students stayed late in the halls, just sitting together without saying much. Others wrote down what they felt, trying to put it into words but failing. Because how could they describe something that touched their soul? It wasn't just a concert, it was something deeper, something they could only feel. Raymond, as usual, didn't say anything after the performance. He simply walked off the stage, picked up his coat, and left the hall. He didn't wait for applause, didn't look for praise, but everyone who was there knew they had seen something rare, something true. The next morning, Elise found a small folded paper near the piano. It was written in old handwriting, and it simply said, "I'm not ready to speak to the world, but thank you for listening." There was no name on it, but everyone knew who it was from. Later that week, Elise gathered with a few close friends in the common room. They sat around and talked about what they had all learned from Raymond. "He taught us more than any teacher," one of them said, "not just about music, but about pain, healing, and silence." Elise nodded and said, "We should do something that honors him." They all agreed, but no one knew what exactly to do. Then one student had an idea. "What if we make a music book?" he said. "Not just any music book, but a book full of songs written from real feelings. Each student could write one piece, something personal, and we'll dedicate it to him." The idea felt perfect, not a gift of money or fame, but a gift from the heart, just like his music. In the following days, students from every class began writing music pieces. Some wrote songs about love, others wrote songs about loss. One girl who had never spoken much in class wrote a simple piano tune about growing up alone. A boy who had failed every music exam wrote a sad cello solo that brought tears to a teacher's eyes. Every note, every page was honest, raw, and emotional. Elise put everything together in a single book with a soft black cover. On the front, she wrote in gold letters, "For the man who played from the heart." Inside, on the first page, they left a message. "Dear Mr. Raymond, you showed us the meaning of true music. You reminded us that pain can become beauty, and silence can speak louder than words." The book was left on the piano bench one night with a small flower. No one gave it to Raymond directly. They knew he wouldn't want attention or a speech. But that evening, after the academy had emptied, Raymond entered the room as usual. He saw the book, sat down slowly, and opened it. He turned each page with care, reading the titles, the notes, the words written by the students. He didn't smile, but his eyes grew wet. He closed the book after an hour and sat still for a long time. He didn't play that night. He didn't need to. The music was already in the book, and in the hearts of the students who had written it. The next day, something surprising happened. Raymond entered the main hallway during class hours, something he had never done before. He walked up to Elise, who was sitting on a bench reading. She looked up surprised and stood quickly. Raymond handed her a folded paper and said, "Thank you." Then he walked away again. Just as quietly as he had come, Elise opened the paper slowly. It had a short message written in neat, clear writing. "I stopped playing because I thought music could only bring back pain. But last night I realized it can also bring peace. Thank you for showing me that I was wrong." Elise didn't say anything, but she pressed the paper to her chest and closed her eyes. The students didn't share that note online. They didn't post it or talk about it to the media. It was a private gift, just like the book had been, but it marked something special. Raymond had begun to speak, not in big ways, not with cameras or interviews, but in small, soft steps that showed he was healing. He started talking a little more during his evening shifts. He smiled more often, and sometimes hummed while cleaning. The students began to see not just a pianist, but a man slowly finding his way back to the world. And though he never asked for anything, the students gave him the one thing he had missed for years: connection, real, quiet, honest connection. And in that he found something greater than applause. He found peace in being seen, in being heard, and most of all, in being remembered. Not as the cleaner, but as the man whose music made the world pause. 1 week later, the academy halls were filled with excitement again, not because of exams or music competitions, but because of something special that was about to happen. A group of students, along with a few teachers, had come up with an idea. It was simple, quiet, and beautiful. Just like Mr. Raymond's music, they called it the Night of Silent Applause. No posters were printed, no guests were invited from outside. It was only for the academy family, students, teachers, and one man who had changed everything. Without saying much, Mr. Raymond had no idea about it. They kept it a surprise, something meant only for him. It was Elise who gently asked him to come to the main recital hall that evening. She didn't tell him why, just said, "Please come and bring your hands, not your mop." That night, Raymond walked into the recital hall slowly. He wore his cleanest shirt and an old brown coat. His shoes were polished but still showed signs of wear. When he stepped inside, he paused. The lights were dim, the stage was lit softly, and the hall was full. All the students were there, sitting quietly, holding candles in their hands. There was no talking, no music, just soft light and waiting hearts. Raymond looked confused, even a little nervous. Elise walked up to him and offered her hand. He took it gently and she guided him to the stage. There was only one thing on it. A piano, clean, shining, waiting. Raymond stood beside it for a moment, looking at the keys. He turned to Elise and whispered, "I didn't prepare anything." Elise smiled and whispered back, "That's okay, neither did we." He chuckled softly, the first time anyone had ever heard him laugh. It was low, warm, and full of surprise. He sat on the bench slowly, adjusted his posture, and placed his hands on the keys. The hall was so quiet you could hear every breath, every heartbeat. He didn't rush, he didn't hesitate. He closed his eyes, and then the music began. The first notes were soft, gentle as falling snow. They floated through the hall like whispers from the past. The melody rose and fell, telling stories no words could explain. It was not a sad song, not entirely. It was full of memory, but also of hope. Every student felt something different. Some thought of their families, some thought of mistakes they had made. Others thought of people they had lost or dreams they were still chasing. But one thing was the same: every heart in that room was wide open. No one recorded, no one moved, no one even blinked too fast. Raymond played not as a performer, but as a man who had lived through pain and found peace through sound. The final note was so soft it almost faded into the silence, and when it ended, no one clapped. Instead, every student raised their candle in the air. The soft glow lit up the entire hall like stars. It was the silent applause. No noise, no sound. Only light. Only love. Raymond looked up and saw all the faces glowing gently. He put a hand over his chest, deeply moved. He didn't speak, but his eyes said everything. He stood slowly, gave a deep bow, and stepped off the stage. Elise met him at the steps, and he whispered, "That might be the last time I play." She asked, "Why?" He answered, "Because I don't know if anything can ever feel this perfect again." Elise smiled and said, "Then let it be the memory that stays forever." The next day, students placed candles in the piano room. They left small notes under the bench, some poems, some thank you letters. One note said, "You taught me how to cry again." Another said, "I never knew music could feel like home. Until I heard yours." Raymond didn't change his job. He still came in every evening with his mop and bucket. But now, he wasn't alone. Every hallway he walked, he was greeted with soft smiles, kind eyes, and quiet respect. Students waved, teachers nodded, and sometimes, someone would softly hum the tune he played. He didn't become a celebrity, and he didn't want to. He never accepted interview offers, and he never performed again in public, but he didn't need to. Because in one moment he had said more than any speech could say, and in that moment the Academy didn't just gain a memory. They gained a truth that music is not about noise or stage lights. It's about feeling, silence, and healing. And the man they once ignored had become the soul of the school, not because he played loud, but because he played real. And in doing so, He gave every person there a reason to listen, not just to music but to each other. Time passed slowly at the music academy. Seasons changed, students came and went, but one thing stayed the same: Mr. Raymond. He still walked the same quiet halls at night, still pushed the old cart, still carried his small bag and mop. But now when people saw him, they didn't see just a cleaner. They saw a man who had reminded them of something important, something that had nothing to do with fame, money, or even talent. He reminded them of honesty, of pain, of beauty that hides in silence. The recital room where he had once played quietly became a special place. Every student who stepped into that room did so with care. They sat at the piano bench with more respect. Some would pause, place their fingers on the keys and close their eyes, trying to feel what he must have felt that night. Others just sat in silence and thought, hoping to connect with something deeper than sound. The music book the students had made for him stayed inside the piano bench. Raymond never took it home. He said it belonged to the room, to the students, to the music that would keep living long after he was gone. Every now and then someone would add a new piece to it. A student struggling with grief or a girl writing a tune for her long-distance father. It became more than a book. It became a shared heart. One day, a student from another city came to the academy. She had seen the video online, watched it. Over and over again, she didn't know his name, but she said, "The man in the video made me believe in music again." She came all the way just to visit the piano he had touched. She didn't speak much, she just played a short song she had written. After playing, she left a small flower on the bench and walked away without a word. No one had told her to do it. It was just what felt right. Raymond never asked for any of this, but each time he saw someone sitting quietly at the piano, he felt something shift in his chest. Not pain anymore, but warmth. The kind of warmth that comes after years of cold. Then came a morning that felt like any other. But it wasn't. Raymond didn't show up for his shift. He didn't call. He didn't leave a message. At first, the staff thought maybe he had taken a day off, but Raymond never missed a day. Not once in all these years. Elise and a few teachers became worried. They contacted the small apartment building where he lived. The landlord said he hadn't come out that morning. When they knocked on his door, there was no answer. Later that day, they received the news. Raymond had passed away peacefully in his sleep. No pain, no struggle, just silence. Just like the way he lived, quiet, gentle, and unnoticed until the end. The academy fell into deep silence that day. Students gathered in the halls with heavy hearts. Some cried openly. Others sat quietly in the recital room. Elise walked to the piano and opened. The bench inside was the music book, still there, still waiting. She placed a white rose on top and whispered, "Thank you." A few days later, the academy held a tribute. No cameras, no lights, just people who loved him. They didn't call it a funeral. They called it a celebration of music. Each student played one piece, something they had written themselves. No one spoke much, no speeches, no grand words, just music, just memories, just love. At the end of the night, Elise walked to the piano and opened the last page of the music book. She had written something new there, something simple. It said, "To Mr. Raymond, you didn't just teach us music, you taught us how to feel it, how to live it, and how to carry it, even when the world is silent." She closed the book and placed it back inside the bench. From that day on, no one ever removed it. The academy placed a small plaque on the wall above the piano. It read, "In memory of the man who made the world pause with a single note." No last name, no dates. Just the truth every year after that. On the same night as his final performance, students gathered in silence. They lit candles, played their hearts out, and remembered the man who gave them more than music. They remembered his kindness, his sorrow, his strength, and his gift. And every time a student sat down to play in that room, they didn't feel alone. They felt his presence in the keys, in the air, in the silence between each note. And so, even though Mr. Raymond was gone, he never really left. Because some music never fades. It simply waits, in silence, until someone is brave enough to listen.